There's a moment early in Insatiable II where the film quietly tells you what kind of sequel it intends to be. Marilyn Chambers sits composed and direct, speaking about herself rather than moving through a world built to impress. The camera doesn't roam, the setting doesn't expand, the film settles in. From that point on, it's clear this isn't about recreating the scale or spectacle of the original. This was about finding a workable shape for a different moment. By 1984, the adult feature landscape had narrowed. Theatrical exhibition was no longer a given, video was dictating pace and price, and sequels were less about escalation than recognition. Some might say they were simply cashing in. However, that would be unfair. Insatiable II emerges from that environment as a continuation that knows its limits and works within them. The film was directed and produced by Stu Segal, often credited as Godfrey Daniels II, from a script by Manny Hayton. Their approach is immediately apparent in the framing device. Rather than pushing the story outward into new and exotic locations or situations, the sequel uses an interview structure with Chambers' Sandra Chase, reflecting on her life and experiences. It's a narrative solution that keeps the film cohesive while allowing individual encounters to unfold as recollection rather than progression. Chambers herself is central in a way that feels different from the original. She isn't presented as a figure to be unveiled or discovered. By this point in her career, that work was long done. Instead, the film leans on her familiarity and ease in front of the camera. Sandra Chase speaks for herself, and the story follows her lead, moving backward and sideways through memory rather than chasing a forward-driving plot. To widen the film beyond Sandra's recollections, the interview begins to ripple outward, inspiring Morgan, played by Juliet Anderson, to explore her own insatiable urges, while the people orbiting them, including Morgan's two daughters in a lightly sketched coming-of-age vein, and Sandra's ever-watchful manager, are shown pursuing their own paths of desire. The supporting cast reflects the same steady, reliable tone of the film. Shanna McCullough and Valerie Laveau play the daughters, both proving rather delightful in the small amount of screen time they enjoy. Male stars Paul Thomas and Jamie Gillis also appear not as interruptions or highlights, but as part of a familiar ensemble that still dominated the scene as the 80s progressed. However, it is arguably Juliet Anderson who is very much on form here, bringing a sharp, inquisitive presence that gives the interview sections real bite. Her questioning of Marilyn Chambers' Sandra Chase is engaging to watch. It is clear that the conversations are inflaming her own imagination and desires. When the two finally share their last scene, it lands as a genuine crescendo, the film tightening its focus and delivering one of its most satisfying moments. Jamie Gillis taps into the normal, darker edge of his screen persona, arriving in a flashback scene that explores the blurred line between pleasure and pain. Paul Thomas appears in a supporting role that leans into his usual calm, authoritative screen presence. However, this tone as a love interest, while suiting the character, does come across as a bit flat, which for me at least made for a less than satisfying performance. An intriguing casting footnote to the production is that actress Cara Lott served as Marilyn Chambers' body double in various scenes, though surviving credits and documentation never specify exactly which moments were hers. It is interesting that a double would be needed, however, as Chambers is still clearly at the height of her career in terms of performance ability. Visually, Insatiable II is clean and controlled. It was still shot on film, but without the flourishes or expansive gestures that made the original so cinematic in its own right. Interiors dominate, lighting is functional rather than expressive, and scenes are staged to be efficient without feeling rushed. The camera observes more than it explores. Accomplished industry cinematographer Jack Remy was behind the camera, and he understood that the film needn't suggest a larger world beyond what's visible. The locations reinforce that feeling. Private homes and contained spaces form the bulk of the setting, not as a stylistic statement, but as a practical choice that suits the story being told. The interview framework allows the film to remain grounded in these environments, making the world of Insatiable II feel smaller but also more focused. True to form, there's also a knowing wink to Marilyn Chambers' past. An ivory snow detergent box appears in Morgan's kitchen, a brief cameo nodding to her pre-film fame as the Ivory Snow Girl, and one of those bits of trivia that rewards attentive viewers of the film. Financing and production decisions sit quietly beneath all of this. By the mid-80s, adult features were being made with tighter margins and clearer expectations. So much so, one pool room encounter quietly lifts footage directly from the original film, a practical bit of recycling that doubles as a clear sign of the cost-cutting measures shaping the sequel. Essentially, Insatiable II doesn't behave like a film chasing cultural impact. It behaves like one designed to exist comfortably within its era, built around a recognizable title, a dependable star, and a structure that could be executed without excess. Compared briefly to the original Insatiable, the sequel is undeniably less ambitious, but it doesn't frame that restraint as loss. Instead, it feels like an acceptance of changed circumstances. The film isn't trying to preserve a moment that had already passed. It's adjusting to what came next. What makes Insatiable II interesting today isn't what it lacks, but what it reveals. It shows a mature film series adapting in real time, shifting emphasis from scale to structure, from spectacle to familiarity. It's not a film reaching backward or forward, but one settling into place, comfortable enough to let Marilyn Chambers talk, remember, and carry the weight of the project herself. In that sense, the movie isn't a grand statement or a footnote. It's a quiet record of an industry recalibrating, captured in the spaces between ambition and practicality, and anchored by a performer who knew exactly how much the camera needed from her. Thanks for watching, everyone. Another quick reminder to check out my link in the description if you'd like to download my free ebook on the early industry, and maybe also head over to the community page where I will be posting a new poll on favorite directors. Thanks again, and I'll see you in the next one.